At this time, I'd like to call the school board meeting to session. It is Monday, May 6, 2019. And how about, because it is her last meeting with us, if you would like to lead us in the national anthem, please. Pledge, sorry. Yeah, would you sing that for us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. And would you like to read the opening statement?
We would like to welcome you to our board meeting and thank you for attending and supporting the works of the Anchorage School District and this board. The board thanks students, parents, teachers, staff, school business partners, and the entire community for your investment in our district with your time, your talent, and your tax dollars. If you are unable to be physically present for the entire meeting, you may choose to tune in to the Municipality of Anchorage's Channel 9 or YouTube to watch the live stream. Recordings of the meetings are also available through the agenda and board docs.
Thank you. And at this time, I would look for approval of agenda. Are there any changes? Yes, Ms. Hilding.
I had two that I would like to ask the board to consider. Make sure I get it right. I'd like to move the, let me roll it down, sorry guys. I'd like to move from action item to non-action item, ASD memorandum 160 in support of renaming the boardroom for Betty Davis. I'd just like to move it to a non-action item. Oh, but somebody has to second to talk about it.
I'm sorry, what?
Somebody has to second before I can
Right.
talk about it.
Second.
Okay.
I just thought we were going to talk more about this on different possibilities of what we might do to honor her, and having to just jump to action without any discussion from non-action. I mean, I was kind of surprised to see it. We haven't really had a chance to talk about different things, and my preference has long been a school, but whatever we do, I'd just like us to be talking about it before we just vote on it. So my motion is to move it to a non-action item, and we can at least discuss what we might like to do.
Yeah.
160.
And just, not that I'm, just a statement that even during non-action items, action items, we do have discussion, but if you feel we need further discussion than that, okay. So we need to vote on that. Yep.
And then Margot is going to be showing up here, but I'm going to, there is abstain.
Okay, all right. So we will, board members, if you'll vote on that change, because we have several others.
I'm not logged in.
Dana? Yeah.
I just voted.
Oh,
It's not on my screen.
wow.
Ours never work. That's fine, I just looked at hers.
Okay, and that agenda amendment passes, with 4 yeas and 2 nays. Did you have another one?
I did, thank you. I would like to remove a non-action item, ASD memorandum number 163 from the agenda. The weapons and dangerous instruments policy revision.
Is there a second?
And I know that it's a non-action item so that we can just discuss it, but I think our practice of making sure our policies go through a fully vetted process before we bring them to the board. Certainly during the non-action item, the board could choose to refer it to committee. I think it was going to the governance committee next, and I think we were expecting to see it talked about there. But I just would like to see us do a practice where if we're doing policy revisions, we make sure we're bringing people to the table before we present them publicly.
Mr. Donnelly, this is your change the policy. Do you have a comment, or would you like to speak on that?
I support keeping it on the agenda. I think it is part of our our conduct rules that if two members move to put something on the agenda, it can be on the agenda. I think this goes against, it undoes that rule, which is part of our code of conduct.
Any other comments before we vote? Okay, board members, please vote. Oh, I need my glasses.
Does it come through for you?
Okay, and to remove that from the agenda fails with 1, 2, 3, 4 nays and 2 yeas. So that memorandum will stay on the agenda. Mr. Holloman.
Yes, I'd like to amend the agenda by adding item ASDR 2018-2019-29 to action items.
Is there a second? I'll second it.
So I'm sorry, Andy, I missed that exact language. You're moving to add resolution 2018-2019-29 to action items, is that what you said?
And Andy, would you like to speak to that?
I do. I have had a lot of questions about our stance on the future budget. And also in the meantime, a number of assembly members have spoken. What this does is kind of address the support we've gotten from the assembly, both publicly and privately, about what looks like a difficult year. So I feel like it's something we need to get on the record.
Ms. Kalis?
Thank you. At the risk of looking like I don't support this, which is not the case, I am also, much like Member Donnelly, going to speak to our code of conduct under meeting procedures, preparation of the agenda, item number 3, that states no item will be placed on the regular board meeting agenda less than 9 business days prior to a regular board meeting, and it continues on. If we're not going to adhere to our own rules, then I'd like to just somehow publicly acknowledge that we're throwing them out. This is not pro or against the motion itself. It's how we're doing this. It's our procedure and how we're doing this.
Ms. Hildy?
Yeah, I think this is, I mean, I just saw this, which is, I guess, a problem in practice, right? But I think it's exactly the same one we voted on last time. Is there any change? This is okay, so I haven't had an opportunity to look at this. So I would be disinclined to review something on that short notice.
I'm going to take a brief at ease. Okay, we're going to come back. Are there any other comments for any other board members? On this, I would say we do have that we do have to give 10 days notice on our agenda to the public on what we are going to put on the agenda. We can certainly put this on our agenda for the next meeting, Mr. Holloman, if you are okay with that. Okay, thank you. Are there any other changes to the? Oh, I don't think we need to vote on it because he's. Yeah, are you going to withdraw that, Mr. Holloman? Mr. Holloman, are you going to withdraw that?
Yes, I'll just withdraw.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. We will vote on the amended agenda. Do we have a motion?
I move to vote on, is that on my sheet? I move to vote on the amendment as agended.
Second.
Okay, I think we understood that. Board members, please vote. Okay, and the agenda is approved with the amendments, the 6 yeas. Yes, Mr. Donnelly. Oh, sure. Mr. Fleckenstein, could we?
And we're gonna have, the next one, we're gonna have 5-minute eddies anyway.
Yeah,
So you can
okay.
call it.
So at this time, we're going to adjourn. I'm going to adjourn the 2018-19 school board sine die, and we'll take a brief 5-minute recess at ease.
So that you guys can share a mic in between you, and then the judge at 10 will have the other one.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As the superintendent of the Anchorage School District, I'm calling this meeting back to order for the oath of office.
Please raise your right hand.
I state your name.
I, Margot Bellamy,
Star Marset.
Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Alaska,
and the Constitution of the State of Alaska,
and that I will honestly,
faithfully,
and
impartially
discharge my duties as a school board member to the best of my ability.
abilities.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have our 2 new board members. I'd like to thank Ted Tedrick, our student justice, as well as Joanne Chung, our officiating justice. Thank you.
We'll take a brief at ease to sign the documents. I'd like to call this board meeting back together. We'd like to resume the board meeting, and we'd ask that all board members re-log in to the board meeting. We'd like to resume the board meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to resume the board meeting. At this time, can board members re-log into your system, please? Yeah. So just be sure you're set up in the meeting and that you can electronically vote. We will continue with the election of officers and the board reorganization. Mr. Fleckenstein, can you assist Ms. Bellamy if she needs? Are you good to go?
The top.
Okay. I like this. All right, at this time, we will vote on the reorganization of the board. Madam Clerk, is there a slate of officers?
Yes, there is. Thank you. I move to elect Board Member Star Marcet as president, Board Member Alicia Hildy as vice president, Board Member Margot Bellamy as clerk, and Board Member Elisa Vacalis as treasurer.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Secretary, can we take a vote? We need the Jeopardy music. At this time, the slate of officers does pass. And at this time, I'm going to hit the last gavel and turn it back over. I'm no longer president. There you go.
I like how that works. So at this time, I would ask board members to take their respective seats. Ms. Bellamy, you'll be sitting where Ms. Hildy's sitting. And I think we're all situated, and thank you everyone for celebrating in this end of the year and a start of a new year. So thank you. And at this time, we have our military report. Colonel Caranta? Did I say it right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening. Colonel John Caranta, the commander of the 673rd Mission Support Group. It's my pleasure this past week to join with Dr. Bishop and Principal Christine Garby to recognize Master Sergeant Tim Schneider for his support of the school during the 30th of November earthquake. Ms. Garby joined me also at the 372nd Training Squadron to recognize Technical Sergeant Michael Owen, also a parent at Fire Lake, who also assisted the staff and the students during the earthquake. And I definitely appreciate Ms. Garby's willingness to recognize our selfless service of our airmen. As we prepare to go into the summer, we'll be working on plans with our outdoor recreation program to partner with the schools on the installation to offer additional opportunities for students. This could include ice fishing at the lakes on bays, cross-country skiing, and use of fat tire bikes at our Eagle Glen Fitness Park for all the schools on J-Bear. It's our desire to have a plan in place whenever we start the fall to share with the principals so students can take full advantage of some of the opportunities we offer on the installation. At the end of the month, I'll be meeting with the principals on the installation to wrap up this school year and plan for a successful beginning of next school year. I look forward to this opportunity to collaborate on ways that we can, again, continue to partner with the schools. And lastly, it was my honor this past month to install Dr. Bishop as my honorary commander of the 673rd Mission Support Group. And we look forward to furthering the relationship between my organization and the Anchorage School District. pending any questions, that concludes my report.
Board members, any questions or comments? Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your time.
Student Advisory Board report.
We just had our last meeting for the year. It was last Friday, May 3rd. At the meeting, we discussed our goals for next year, and probably the biggest one is we want to host at least 2 events next year for the community and for our schools. We also had elections for the Student Advisory Board President and the Student Representative-elect. So this year, the current year, our elect is Baron Louie, and so he'll be taking over for me next year. He was unable to make it tonight because of a prior commitment, but he will be at the next meeting, our next meeting, in 2 weeks to meet all of you, and he'll sort of introduce himself and prepare for the next year. And then my last meeting will be on June 3rd, and his first meeting will be at the start of the 2019-2020 school year.
Thank you. Committee reports. I know we just had finance. Ms. Michaelis.
Yes, the Finance Committee met this afternoon. We reviewed a student nutrition cafeteria cash controls audit. We picked out one summer audit to be done, which was employee background checks. And when the Finance Committee meets on June 3rd, we will talk about more topics to cover for the 2019-2020 audit plan. We got a quick touch up on the end of year fund balance, and we look forward to having one more Finance Committee meeting before the end of the school year on June 3rd, or as needed by the Finance Department.
Governance.
Well, I'll just give an update from the last meeting. We went over some superintendent evaluation. I believe we'll have an ad hoc committee maybe created at a later point. We're going through that process, and then we discussed making changes to our board policy on calling in, counting as attendance. So I'll present a proposed policy revision to the new governance chair, Member Holloman. I don't know when they're planning to meet.
Communications.
We met on the 17th, and we discussed having a couple of community listening sessions this summer, listening posts out at various public places, and also how to connect with organized community groups a little bit more. We also were starting to talk about looking forward to the 2019-2020 school year and what that communications plan will look like, and part of it will depend on the new director of communications when that person comes in. I'm sure they'll have a lot of ideas. And then we talked about ways to improve internal communication within the district. So, and our next meeting is, Katie, do we have a date for the next meeting?
If the new chair is going to keep that, then it's
May 17th.
or 17th.
Okay.
And just to be clear, I'd like to announce that Margot Bellamy will be our new chair of our Communications Committee, and Andy Holloman will be the new chair of our Governance Committee, and Ms. Michaelis is going to stick with finance with us. Yes, Ms. Hildy.
At our communications committee, we talked about maybe getting board approval going forward with those ideas for having community listening sessions this summer. Do you want us to do that at this meeting, or?
Well, I think we need to clarify. I talked with the board president, and she didn't think it necessarily required a vote, but if it does, we certainly can do that. I'm not exactly sure.
Can you refresh my memory?
Yeah, just to, just to see if that's what get board members saying this is the board wants to go out to the community and say this is an official board thing we're doing, whether it's be one of the ideas is like the library, and a couple board members will be available for really a listening session,
right,
being open to the public. But I think that the board should at least be aware.
Right. Well, and I thought maybe that might be something we talk about during our retreat if we want to do that, or even during new business to get board consensus.
Okay. I just want to be considerate of her time to plan, but I think that's fine.
Yeah. We good? Okay. At this time, I'd like to read our statement on public testimony. And the board welcomes public comments on both action and non-action. as well as in general. We value public comment as it both ensures that we remain aware of public thoughts, ideas, and concerns, and informs our decision-making process. We have a table up in front and center with 2 seats and microphones available for testimony when I call your name. You have 3 minutes to testify, and you may begin speaking when the timer appears on the screen to your left and begins the countdown. When you have 30 seconds left, the number will turn yellow. When the timer reaches 0, please finish your sentence. In order to provide equity that all would like to speak, the board asks that there be no clapping after testimony, as it may intimidate others wishing to testify with opposing opinions. Additionally, it's not our practice that board members answer questions or engage in discussion with members of the public. This is your time to speak and our time to listen. The board will consider all information shared by the public, and when deemed necessary, issues raised in testimony will be referred to the administration for follow-up. And at this time, okay. So at this time, I have 3 that would like to come up together. It's Rosa, McKenna, and Kai? Kai? Okay, and if there's other students, you're welcome to join them. But is it just those 3? Okay. So these are exchange students that traveled to Ecuador?
Ecuador students, please come
Yes.
forward. From Stellar, I believe.
Yeah. A piece. Okay.
All right, so if you guys want to be on one side, and we'll have other Ecuador students on the other side. Facing them, facing them.
And I'm so jealous because I've not been to Ecuador.
We will have one for you here. That would be best. And prior to speaking, if you could state your name, so for the record, each individual, I know that you're going to collectively share wisdom and represent the whole entire group. But as you speak, if you could say your name.
So my name is Rosalie Hohenstein. I'm a teacher at Stellar Secondary, and I have a little presentation written out. So, well, first of all, hello. We wanted to come in tonight to thank you for your support in making the Stellar Chuquiragua Exchange Program a reality. Standing before you is the first group of students to participate in this exchange. For those of you who are not familiar with the program, the Stellar Chuquiragua Exchange Program is a 2-way immersion exchange between Cumbaya, Ecuador, and Anchorage, Alaska. The underlying purpose of this program was to create a long-term immersion program and cultural exchange between Stellar Secondary and Chuquiragua Comunidad Educativa. Ideally, this program would continue to grow as the relationship between these 2 schools continues to develop over time. This program provides a unique learning opportunity in which students from Alaska live with families in Ecuador and experience daily life and activities as an Ecuadorian student would encounter. These are the amazing Alaskan students that have chose to spend 2 months in Ecuador attending school, participating in community events, living with host families, volunteering, and representing Alaska within a global community. Standing next to them on this side, we have our visiting students from Ecuador that are just starting their experience here in Alaska and will be staying with us for the next month. So there were a number of desired outcomes as a teacher that I was looking for in this program, both academically and emotionally. I was hopeful that students would develop greater analytical and problem-solving skills, as traveling in a foreign country tends to facilitate. I was interested in them developing a greater understanding of global issues. I was hopeful that they would grow as individuals with the confidence to confront challenges that placed them outside of their comfort zone. And I was also hopeful that they would make lifelong connections and friendships with the people that they met. I wanted to promote social awareness and respect for cultural diversity. And of course, as a Spanish teacher, I wanted to see their linguistic skills flourish. But these were my goals. And what I found even more valuable was listening to how students articulated for themselves what they have learned through this experience. I have asked a few of our students to answer questions on how they have grown and what they found most valuable in their exchange. And here are a few of their responses. So, McKenna?
So my name is McKenna Varela, and I went on the exchange, obviously. So while I was in Ecuador, I truly learned I understood truly how even if you don't share the same blood with someone, they can still be your family. And I think that that is a very important thing for people to understand. And my host family helped me through a lot while I was down there. They taught me things like forgiveness and how to maintain a positive attitude through situations that seem like they don't have one. And so, yeah.
Okay. And then you can just pass it on to Stuart.
Hello, my name is Stuart Reinhardt, and the foremost among the many goals I had going to Ecuador was to improve in the Spanish language, and I would say that I have. I believe that that kind of immersion is the best way to learn a new language, and going to Ecuador was the perfect way to cement where I am and grow beyond that. So, yeah, thank you.
So the most valuable thing. Oh, my name's Megan Bonnie, by the way. Sorry. The most valuable thing I learned from this experience was learning how to interact with a family that I didn't really know how to speak very well to. Because when I first went to Ecuador, I didn't really know as much Spanish as the other people on this exchange did. And so it was really interesting to try to communicate with a family that you had. I could understand some. But then at least by the end of the exchange, I could joke around with them and have conversations. And so it was really cool to see that progression from not really being able to speak basic conversations to be able to actually have conversations with them. Yeah, that was. You want to speak?
Yeah, maybe Katie or.
My name is Luca Duke. One of the most valuable things I learned from this experience, actually, I learned a lot of really valuable skills that I'll use for the rest of my life, but one of Stellar's main philosophies is self-directed learning, and I think that's something that it really shaped me as a person and shaped me into a really independent learner and a better person overall.
Hi, my name is Katie Scoggin, and the most valuable lesson I learned was to take every chance to say hi and get to know everyone. The people in Ecuador are the kindest, most gentle and considerate people I've ever met, and they want you to feel safe and comfortable and happy all the time. They make me laugh. And even though we're different and there's that language barrier, they taught me to be welcoming to people, even strangers.
My name is Siri Southwold. One of the things I learned most was probably how to work with time management. We had pretty busy schedules the whole time we were there, and just learning how to separate all my work into different times and doing that was good. So.
Hi, my name is Kai. My exchange trip to Ecuador is filled with learning and new experiences every day. But there's one moment that stands out to me. It was during one of my first weekends there. We went to El Panaceo, a statue of the Virgin Mary that sits on a hill over the city of Quito. You can pay $1 to go up into the statue and onto an observation deck that circles the statue. I go to the observation deck, and as I looked over the city, buildings sprawling forever in and out of the mountains, a thought sliced through my brain, releasing it from the confines of my life in Anchorage. We really aren't alone. In the city below me, there were, and still are, about 3 million people. Do you realize how many people 3 million is, let alone 7 billion worldwide? And each of those people is shaped differently, their minds all having different ways of thinking and processing. With that much brain, we could solve all our world problems. War, pollution, global warming. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I learned that we don't have to deal with problems by ourselves. We have 7 billion people in this small world of ours, and that's 7 billion attempts to solve a problem. So at least one of them is bound to work out.
So
I would hope that when our Ecuador students have been here a little bit longer, that they would come back and share with us.
And so, yes, this is Rosa Hohenstein again. I was just going to say, so our students just got here literally yesterday morning. And after a month of being here, hopefully we can come back and present again to see what were some of the experience that they found most valuable in their time here. But
Thank you.
Again, thank you.
Thank
Mucho
you.
gusto. Gracias.
Alicia Sarah, and Chris Riley. And Alicia, you can begin when you see the clock to your left there.
Thank you. Good evening, Anchorage School Board members. Thank you for your service and congratulations to the newly elected members. For the record, my name is Alicia Sira and I'm the Executive Director of the Associated General Contractors of Alaska. I'm a proud product of the Anchorage School District. I went to Cloud Elementary, Golden View Middle School, and Diamond High School before completing my master's at UAA and ultimately landing a career advocating for the construction industry in Alaska. On behalf of the Associated General Contractors of Alaska, I would like to express our disappointment in the lack of communication regarding the recent policy voted on by the school board, mandating the use of apprentices on Anchorage School District projects over $100,000. The Associated General Contractors of Alaska is a trade association representing over 650 Alaska construction businesses, both union and non-union. Our members support all efforts to maintain fair and open competition in the bidding process for publicly funded construction projects. I want to make it very clear that although AGC absolutely supports and encourages the use of apprentices whenever possible, we believe that it should be a voluntary decision made by the contractor. If an apprentice program or an apprenticeship, use of apprentice, would benefit the construction of a particular project, the contractors otherwise qualified to perform the work would be the first to recognize that fact, and they would be the most qualified to negotiate such an agreement. Mandates like this could have the effect of limiting the number of competitors on a project and increasing costs to implement and monitor, which would ultimately be paid for by the school district and taxpayers. We urge the Anchorage School Board to reconsider the mandatory apprentice requirements recently adopted and open up the discussion to include the construction community. While AGC is not a contractor, we are the largest trade association in the state representing potential offerers on your projects. We are an interested party and wish to offer our input and inform our members of policy modifications that potentially affect their business models and which projects they decide to bid on. We appreciate the opportunity to share our insight with you and help advance our common goals. Thank you.
Thank you.
I represent a contractor in the city that's been in business since 1964. We employ approximately 80 employees, some of which will be on school district projects this summer. Regarding this policy, a couple concerns we have. Obviously, it's not implemented as of yet, but it will be hitting contracts come next year. A couple things I'd like to ask the school board is, regarding this policy, how does the school district plan to monitor, track, and report on this goal? The current wage Title 36 requirements do not allow for that. I think it's going to be an undue cost on the project managers or on contractors that will be passed on to the school board or the school district. Regarding this policy, a big question we have as a contractor is what happens when you don't comply with it? There are no implications in this policy regarding non-compliance. That's an unopened risk, an unqualified risk that we have to plan for. And how do you bid for it and how do you compete against it? And on the apprenticeship program, regarding apprenticeship, it's a voluntary process. We can't force an employee to become an apprentice. When they're given the opportunity to come work for us and work on a deal, on a state project, state-funded project, they fall under Title 36 rules. Well, Title 36, that individual employee will make approximately about $60 an hour working for us. As an apprentice, he's going to be closer to 47. So given the choice, what choice do you think he will make or she will make? We can't force them to do that or make that decision. So that's something else to consider in fulfilling these goals. We're a roofing contractor. There's currently no state of Alaska registered apprenticeship programs. You know, what happens, you know, there's federal ones, but does that mean we have to go out of state to find an apprenticeship program and work with somebody out of state to comply with this rule? As a general contractor, how do you, at bid day, when you're getting numbers up until, you know, bid time's typically 2 o'clock, on bid day, how does a general contractor vet the bids he's getting? He is not guaranteed that his subcontractor is going to meet these apprenticeship goals. So that's a huge risk for them to take on once the project started. So there's a lot of unintended consequences in this policy. While admirable, it's a nice goal to have, but the way it's written right now, it's a requirement. So how do you comply once the contracts are signed and the work starts? That's all I have.
Thank you. If I could have Suzanne McCarthy, I believe it is, and Vince Beltrami.
Hi. Okay, good evening. I'm Suzanne McCarthy, and I'm the director for the Alaska Laborers Training Program, which runs a federally registered apprentice program. And I just wanted to invite everybody to come to the training school. I've kind of reached out to everybody, and it's an open invitation. I would like you to come see firsthand what it is apprenticeship is and how the program works. Apprenticeship develops people's skills. It is like a degree in construction. They take you and teach you and mix the classroom related instruction with hands-on, and that's how you get excellent people, and that's what this program is. Construction is one of the longest term apprentice programs, not even in the United States, worldwide, and it's proven that it works. That's how you develop a top-notch workforce. One of the biggest complaints we have in the state of Alaska is we want our young people to go to work. We don't want to have to import our workforce. This solves that construction problem. Construction is a high demand occupation in Alaska. It's one of the highest wage jobs in Alaska. That's what we want our young people to do. We have about 100 apprentices, and about 50% of them are Anchorage School District graduates. So you want people that live here and have a vested interest in the workforce, developing our infrastructure. I think the spirit of this policy that was approved is to give our young people that chance to build our infrastructure and be part of this. There are currently 224 federally registered apprentice programs and sponsors in the state of Alaska. In the construction-related industries. So there's plenty of apprenticeship programs, and it's just a great way to develop our young people. So I hope that each of you will come out when you get a chance and tour our school and see really what we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait for the reset on the clock.
Take just a second.
Good evening, school board members and superintendent. My name is Vince Beltrami. I'm the president of the Alaska AFL-CIO. That's the state's largest labor organization. Prior to this job, I was the statewide training director for the largest apprenticeship program in the state, which is the NECA IBEW Joint Labor Management Program. I know a little bit about what goes into apprenticeship. I also am very thankful for the policy proposed by Board Member Donnelly and passed by the board. I'm actually wildly perplexed and no disrespect to the previous testifiers, but on the position that they took regarding apprenticeship. For any organizations that are involved in supplying skilled craft workers to the construction industry, it seems they'd be supportive of any effort that encourages and supports the training of Alaskans for our state's future needs. It's widely known that there are challenges in finding construction workers in Alaska, despite the fact we've been in kind of a slow-burning recession the past several years. And I've heard claims that this policy would drive up construction costs. That in itself is a baffling assertion, which there is no data to back up that I'm aware of. Since this policy only applies to prevailing wage jobs, anyone less than a full journeyman level, all journeymen are required to be paid the full Davis-Bacon wages. If the only way you can get a break on that is if you hire apprentices. It's not mandatory that you hire apprentices in the case of the gentleman who said he was a roofing contractor, because there is an exception in the very last line that says the requirement shall only apply to crafts for which a federally registered or state of Alaska approved apprenticeship program exists. So the roofers don't have to do that if there's no standards that do that. However, when you get to save, instead of paying the full journeyman rate, you start apprentices generally at about 50%. That's a tremendous cost saving when you have generally a ratio that's in 2 journeymen to 1 apprentice or 1 journeyman to 1 apprentice. You can see real quickly that the savings would add up if you get to utilize more apprentices on the project. If they're trying to contend that it's an expense based on more difficulty in administrating that, I don't buy that for a second. I've filed and reviewed and done a lot of look at prevailing wage filings. They're not that hard to figure out. This is a proactive policy that will do well for our community to bring more people, give more opportunities to more apprentices, which is something we need. Suzanne pointed out the local hire aspect. We are inundated with out-of-state workers all the time when we can't meet the need. So this is a way that you can really emphasize bringing in local Alaskans through the apprenticeship programs and helping the industry out. So please give this policy time to work, and I think that you'll see that it's a win-win for everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. If I could have Jeff Mayfield and Kelly Lessons. And Jeff, you can begin when you see the clock to the side there.
Thank you. Hello, guys. My name is Jeff Mayfield. I'm the father of an 8-year-old son attending an Anchorage School District school, Cassoon. I was disappointed at the majority of members' decision to vote against a prior resolution in opposition of the governor's budget as it pertains to education a couple weeks ago. After the initial vote, I wrote to some school board members about my concerns. Thank you to the 2 of you who did respond to me. And they gave me a very thoughtful and honest reply. Both stated their full opposition against the proposed budget cuts to education, even though they had voted against the resolution. I was told that one of the reasons for voting against that resolution was because there was not enough opportunity for the public to speak out for against the budget ourselves. I'm here to counter that argument and voice my opposition to the governor's budget and ask that the school board do the same. I have been to many Anchorage area caucuses and testified at 2 of them, and I can say with confidence that the majority of Anchorage is opposed to the governor's cuts to education. I was also told that the governor and legislators already know where the board stands on this issue, and to sign a resolution restating it would do no good. I would disagree with that and state that by signing the resolution or another like it, you and your constituents have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Teacher confidence in this district leadership is at the lowest I've ever personally seen it. This resolution sends a message to teachers that you will support them and their students and that you are willing to fight for their jobs. This resolution sends a message to parents that you will fight for their children at a time when they question your efficacy. This resolution sends a letter to the students that they are your priority over any political deals or alignment. Bottom line is that our children are our #1 priority, and I hope that we can all agree on that. I really do believe that we can all agree on that. I urge that the board to propose another similar resolution and to vote to approve it so that we can send the right message not only to the governor and legislatures, but also the people that matter, the people being our teachers, parents, and students of our district. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. program when you say there you go, Kelly.
Hi, good evening. It's a really exciting night to be here tonight. I'm here again because I wanted to welcome, did I say my name, Kelly Lessons? I wanted to welcome Ms. Bellamy to the board, to celebrate Ms. Marset's re-election, and to express my continued appreciation that the board unanimously chartered the ad hoc committee on health, wellness, nutrition, and learning, and to solicit your serious collective engagement with the committee's recommendations over the coming weeks. The committee has met 3 times this spring to discuss the importance of adequate time for physical activity and nutrition in optimizing learning and wellness for all elementary students. At each meeting, board members and administrators have respectfully engaged with community members who have contributed their own time and expertise. I am optimistic that the next meeting will produce a set of evidence-based recommendations regarding the quality and quantity of time that ASD might allocate to lunch, PE, unstructured play, starting in fall of 2019. I believe that each of you serve on the board because you hold children's growth and well-being near and dear to your hearts, and because you know that the policies you craft matter in our large and incredibly diverse district. Your thoughtful engagement with potential recommendations to Board Policy 5040 have the potential to radically improve the day-to-day experiences of students across ASD, including and especially those who are unable to attend schools outside of their neighborhoods. About 2 weeks ago, my family attended the Global Village, a community building event at the Mountain View Boys and Girls Club. It was awesome. It was a dynamic dance and performance collaboration in which classically and diasporically trained dancers embodied how difficult Anchorage can be to maneuver without a car. I have never before seen the acts of bicycling across town or waiting at a cold, dark bus stop or carrying your children performed by dancers before. It was not the Nutcracker. Although their performance didn't touch on school busing, the topic could have fit into their piece because ASD doesn't bus students to schools they lottery into. This could be a major reason why students who attend the most sought-after programs are really disproportionately coming from non-disadvantaged families. I mention all of this because most ASD students are given 20 minutes for lunch, a time frame which doesn't meet CDC standards. Some schools offer up to 30 minutes. Any school offering more recess than 20 to 25 is an outlier. Charter and alternative schools are these outliers. And at least 6 of the neighborhood schools I've spoken to have reported that students have less time for recess and lunch than ASD policy currently establishes. So over the next few weeks, I really want each of you to think about, to grapple with whether all kids deserve evidence-based time to eat their lunch and to build the lifelong social and emotional skills that they need to succeed during the frequent bouts of play that studies show they benefit from. Thank you.
Thank you. Eugene Haberman and is it Neva Reese? Sorry, I'm having a tough time reading this.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I represent myself. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, decision made by the governing body is more like in public interest. Note, I live in the Massachusetts Valley. As board members, during your school board meetings, you address policies and procedures before, during, and after agenda and non-agenda items. The Anchorage Assembly addresses policies and procedures before, during, and after public hearings. There's legislation that they've already had one public hearing, the Anchorage Assembly, that would result in a situation that the public during the public hearings would be denied the right, freedom of speech, to address policies and procedures, and result in a situation of violation of freedom of speech, and leave the situation that the public would be dictated to what those policies and procedures by the Anchorage Assembly, and the public would be denied the right to question or comment on those policies and procedures. This act was laid on the table as the last legislative act by Assemblymember Trainee on April 9th. There's already been public hearing, and they're continuing public hearing on item number 2019-57 in about 2 weeks from next Tuesday night. tomorrow night, 2 weeks from tomorrow night. Now, there's reasons for that scenario. They're obvious, but let me just be very brief in respect for the time and the board. There's concerns out there that there's repetition of people addressing policies and procedures, and I'm obviously the one that they're targeting. But the reality is this, that I would not have to address repeatedly about policies and procedures like breaking Open Meetings Act and state laws providing a reasonable opportunity for the public to be heard if they had not had addressed the issue from the beginning. But as the meetings go, month after month, year after year, both the Borough Assembly out in the Valley and the Anchorage Assembly have conducted a policy of indifference and failed to address the concerns, and have allowed a situation where I have to go as responsibly and address those concerns when those issues happen. And I focus on those particular items of the agenda, and because of my knowledge of the meetings, of the Assembly meetings, particularly when they're at the City Hall, where very few members of the public are in attendance and have knowledge, and they're limited to only knowing audio of what is being said. The end result is I do have the knowledge and respectfully address that issue. I hope that you do not concur with the situation and that you will participate and challenge and enforce the right of freedom of speech and allow the public to address policies and procedures. And I also hope that people will address the public hearing 2 weeks from tomorrow night and not me alone on the situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Neva Reese. I've been a librarian with the Anchorage School District for 12 years, and I come this evening because I wanted to talk about a couple of ways that I think people are underutilized in the Anchorage School District. And I think one of them at least can address some of the budget concerns. I've noticed over the last few years that we've had some programs put into effect like Alice and Champs, and they have a lot of virtue, but I do believe that our teachers could have come up with just as good of plans as we have paid lots and lots of money to other people to design for us. And Champs, I would use as an example. As a librarian, I ordered, I don't remember how many books for Champs. Most of us that took the training were given books at the time. When I got a new administrator, she brought in all her own copies of Champs books. So I think that the company that creates those, the literature for that program benefited by thousands and thousands of dollars just from our one school. So I'd really like to ask for people to kind of think about how those programs are utilized. And I do honestly believe that our teachers, who are vetted, educated people who have come to work for the school district, have a lot of skills that could be called upon to help in the future for any programs like that that the district wants to implement. That we don't really need to go to outside people for those kinds of resources and programs that we could put into effect, and that perhaps people that are closer to the schools and know the kids might come up with better plans even that we find. And the other, while I was thinking about underutilization of people, I wanted to mention also and give some kudos to all the people in our district that work as classified employees. Many of them are leaders within their own communities, especially when you look at the immigrant population. I sat in on a staff meeting once where people were talking abstractly about the Sudanese community with a total lack of awareness that one of our classified staff members was a leader in the Sudanese community, and he sat in the staff meeting and nobody asked him for any input on the discussion. So I would like us to really think about how many people in our classified employee classification have real skills that we should pull on to help enrich our district in ways that the budget can't pay for. I'm sorry, I'm so nervous. You know, I can go to meetings with 10,000 people and stand up and speak, and I'm fine. And when I come and speak at something like this, I just shake. So I apologize for my shaky voice. But I would like to ask you to consider paying more attention to those skills that we already have in the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, oh, sorry. Is there anyone else that would like to testify before we move on? Seeing no one, I think we're ready for the superintendent's report.
I was just giving myself a few more seconds. No. Thank you. Madam President, at this time, could I ask Paula Perry Edwards to come forward? She's going to assist me with our update. Up there before you, there's just 4 short items, and the first one I'd like to start with is the volunteer. Paula's put together some data for us to share with the board, and then she'll close off the report. So just some updates. Facilitating, this was a new position, or the FTE was still here, but a change of focus, a refocus for the position for which Paula serves. So we had 200 volunteer applications, 54 placed in schools for consistently over time, 156 for temporary for individual activities, whether they be science fairs or other events. And then 22 were unable to volunteer due to their work schedule or when they were called, they weren't available, but we wanted to share all the numbers. The different schools, as well as just different areas, even here at the ASD Center, if you could go back, were the different places for which, just so everybody could take a look at those, where our volunteers served. And then the next slide shares just the different requests from schools, as well as requests from Paula to our folks that volunteered. And so we tried to match their skills, Paula did, with what they were interested in with the needs out there in our schools. This was really fun, the therapy dog team, and if you have questions, you'll have to ask Paula about that. There were over 3,000 participants were served, and this was especially useful after the earthquake. And these are just a few of the volunteer partnerships for which just the groups were sought. Multiple volunteers came out of these partnerships to serve in our schools. And again, a big influx came during the earthquake, so much so that I don't think we had enough jobs, she said, for the number of people who came out. And I'll turn it over to Paula.
In closing, I would like to say, on behalf of the Anchorage School District, I would like to say to all the volunteers, thank you, thank you, thank you for volunteering and your precious gift of time. You helped us to work toward our vision of educating students for success in life every day. I'm working on a way to further recognizing our amazing volunteers, all 777 of them, for the 2018-2019 school year. And I look forward to continuing to recruit and work with volunteers next year. Thank you to Superintendent Dr. Dina Bishop, Board President Star Marcette, the Elementary Education Department, colleagues and community members for the opportunity to serve Anchorage students and connecting with them with our caring community. And that concludes my update.
All right, if anybody had any questions, they can certainly.
Ms. Hildy.
Well, thank you for that wonderful report. It's exciting to hear everybody, and I love them getting in our schools and seeing, what life is really like for our students and teachers. Is there any goal setting you have for the next year on the recruiting numbers for the ongoing volunteers or the temporary placements? Anything of that capacity-wise that you're looking to reach, or?
Well, my goal is to hopefully grow the program much bigger. It's a lot. I'm a team of one, and so I'm hoping to come back a little bit early. I would have to discuss that with my supervisor in order to maybe go to the schools doing registration and sign up volunteers. That's one of my goals. And another one is to hopefully streamline the process even more. So that's something I'm working on as well.
Ms. Bellamy.
No.
I'd just like to acknowledge your help at Kids Day. The district had a great booth, but your help with that booth and with the stage was phenomenal. So thank you.
Thank you.
And the volunteers that you sent.
Thank you.
And I just have to say, losing my voice, way back before I even was on the board, I had this vision. And I went to Ptarmigan and I started looking at how many volunteers were going in our schools. And I think Ptarmigan at the time had 1 or 2 volunteer hours a week. And I was just dismayed. And so it's taken us a little while to get there, but I am so happy with our selection of the person who is leading this program, when way back when I had a vision, because you have certainly outdid my expectations. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. And I would just like to thank Ms. Perry Edwards. She begrudgingly came in front of you. She did not want to public speak, but I talked her into finishing up the presentation and of the collection of her data and her work so that she could be recognized publicly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And next on the brief agenda was the leadership organization. I did want to share with you some of the changes within our organization as we end the school year. This was shared briefly with our leadership, and I wanted to share it with you as well. So we have had some changes, and I wanted to share the cabinet level, if you will, major organization of our folks that support schools and people. Of course, the superintendent and we have a director of communications, which Member Mitchell mentioned is in the hiring process presently. This week we should have a decision on that position. But also we changed a little bit and altered the work of the compliance officer for EEO, which served in the Human Resources Department. That position is really out on a team that works with the entire cabinet team under my direct supervision. And while there is going to be some compliance, because that certainly work didn't go away, some of the work will be handled by other people in the department where it's appropriate. But also we're looking at really building capacity for moving in the direction of equity and hiring someone that has that lens, not only with the hiring and the business side of the house, but also the instructional equity to see how we can build that. It is new. There isn't, we're looking to build those outcomes for you, but that is a major change as this position was in HR prior to this time. And then if you take a look, the Chief Human Resources, Operating Officer, Financial Officer, Information Officer, and then the Deputy Superintendent. We worked with our team this year to really take a look at where the significance of the work happened and what was, for efficiencies, what was double done, if you will, by 2 different. So we worked to really streamline the work, first of all, and then to put a position for which we had of a retirement and our chief academic officer in a place that was most appropriate for the majority of the work and the supports needed. And the deputy superintendent, as well as others, picked up the primary workload of the academic officer. And if you look at Chief of Human Resources, again, that there were 4 senior directors in that area. There was the senior director of EEO, and that again was moved, and now we have a senior director of labor, which is a position. We're going to have a senior director of benefits, which now we have health service and benefits, which is John Garrity's position, and he is leaving the district to move to a place where his children are going to compete. They have he has a good golfer in his family. And then the senior director of talent management, and this was the processing of our hiring, and really in coming in line with the new organization and what HR truly is focused on. It is talent management. So presently, Matt Tieford sits in the Senior Director of Labor, and as of today, that position will be open as the interviews have been completed for Chief Human Resources Officer. I'm going to recommend to the board that Matt Tieford take that position. And next, we have the Deputy Superintendent. So this, again, is served currently by Dr. Stock and will be, I have that, sorry, I didn't want you to think, presently as well as into next year. Just taking a look at the Senior Director of Secondary, Elementary, those presently are Kirsten and Glenn, Dr. Johnson and Glenn Nielsen. Senior Director of Teaching and Learning, just so you know, is presently Dr. Knutson. Senior Director of Special Education is Cindy Anderson, and Director of Assessment and Evaluation is Patrick Garrity. So these positions are filled. Next, we have the Senior Director of Secondary, which is Dr. Johnson Strumpler. And if you notice the FTE for which was vacated, we did have funds. We were in the black in this because of the salary range, but the support was really in the secondary level. Secondary education works a lot with sports and appeals in sports, as well as discipline and appeals. And the work that was being done was in that secondary job. So to reserve funds for the district, as well as meet the need of the job, there was a secondary director instead of the additional chief. But the secondary director, which supports all secondary principals and assistant principals in all of our schools, which is really supporting then the teachers in the schools as well as the 24,000 students in those areas, would be, we have a director of secondary open. The others are filled by Marty Lang and Joe Zabotny. Director of charter schools, of course, is Vinsek, Mr. Vinsek, Daryl Vinsek. The principal of special schools is presently open, and that person retired from Alaska and is moving to another state to work. And then the director of career and technical education, which is presently an acting, Missy Fraze is the acting director of career and technical education. And then senior director of elementary, this is the one that has no changes. So we have 4 directors serving over 60 schools, as well as the director of pre-K, which the goal of that service was really to grow pre-K opportunities in the district, which we have done, and this group has won $1.6 million to expand, but also to bring equity to those programs. We had some programs that were 2 hours, some programs that were 4 hours, and we're just working to offer those, and they were in more schools so that students can actually go to their home schools. The more students can go to their home schools rather than hub schools. And then the Senior Director of Teaching and Learning, again, this is Dr. Knutson, and these are mainly our programs. The Director of Teaching and Learning, and she's presented to you is Dr. Bellamy. Another Director of Teaching and Learning, she is also presented, that would be Diane Orr. Director of World Languages, Brandon Locke. Director of ELL, AEL, Academic English Language, is presently open. The Director of Title I is presently open. Senior Director of Indian Education is Doreen Brown, and the Director of Fine Arts, of course, is Dr. Woods. So we, the Senior Director, we look for Doreen to really help guide. These positions work quite a bit with grant money and entitlement money, and we look for the expertise there to really capture how we can work together and understand the federal grant process. So what we did was streamline the work together in different categories. So we have special education. We did have an addition here. The addition is paid through grant funding, as well as the secondary special education CTE and transition person. The goal for our transition is literally to transition students to the next level, and the data that we have found Cindy Anderson, in conjunction with our Director of Career and Technical, Acting Director Missy Fraze, have studied data in regard to success of students who take career technical courses. It is not only good for all students, it's good for all students, but it's specifically good for students with IEPs. So they tend to graduate on time more, be more engaged in school. So we want to grow that and use, really have a career and technical opportunity for every student in high school, and to really help facilitate that with transitions. We have a director for special education in that category. Again, it's a grant funded position, an entitlement grant. So that was the organization. If you have any questions, I can certainly answer those.
Any board? Ms. Hilding?
Yeah, I just had two. This is the one that the board will need to vote on to comply with our board policy. So is this the draft you're presenting, or will there be a later one that you want us to be voting on?
I can present it later. This was just as a brief update. As a draft, there were, the request came, there were many positions that came open, and an opportunity to really adjust the work with the expertise that we have occurred. And so I wanted to update the board before we move too further. But I can put this in a board memo at any time. Yes, Ms.
And then
Hilding?
could you elaborate on the new equity position, on the outcomes you hope that position to bring?
Sure. At this time, we would like someone whose work is really in taking a look at the district, and as we move into finding success for all students, to understand and to be there to understand the balance and the equity of opportunities in our district, as well as curricula, taking a look at curriculum. But really, we haven't had it. We've been studying many other districts our size, and this is a position for which is highly valued in order to guide the work in regard to equity across, whether it is certainly to work with things that we have an ad hoc committee to work on, equity in opportunities in school, recess and nutrition. It could be equity in regard to student groups having equity and access. So we look at the outcomes, and this person would help us move through processes to help understand, do we have an equity lens when we move forward with whether it's hiring or a new program, a new curriculum. So we want a lens that would allow us to consider, in looking at data, to say, are there student groups that when we just put an opportunity out there that aren't represented in that opportunity, and then how can we change that? Really, basically an internal auditor of our, internal auditor of our processes to ensure that we have thought about the equity as we move forward. So it is a little undefined. That's the outcome. We have, I look to the guidance of other school districts to be able to put together a program. Again, some districts have equity departments, and knowing that we did not have additional funds, I just chose to rearrange some work on the EEO and the functions that do belong in HR to stay in HR. The outside independent person EEO would remain with the compliance, but also take a look at the equity piece. So I tried to have an outcome with just the money that I already, and the positions for which we already had.
Ms. Bellamy?
So I do like the equity position. I think it's long overdue. I'm not quite sure of how the instructional side and the employee side would work, so if you could keep an eye on that, and as we work through that process. And then the other comment had to do with the senior director, the piece where you had a senior director evaluating another senior director. Do you think that would create a conflict, or do you have a plan? I think that would be Doreen Brown. I think, where did she fall in that?
Correct, yes, yeah.
So that you have a plan for that?
We do.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's a great question, yes.
Well, I know I'm excited about the new position and look forward to see how it's defined and the outcomes, just given in the past I've had several meetings with community members on exactly that, equity and diversity within our staff, and how we can increase that. And so I think this is a good start for the district. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to say one thing, because sound bites matter. I've learned that since coming to Anchorage. We did not create a new position. We did not add anything. In fact, the reorganization creates additional funds in the black because we took positions and transferred them and changed the work. So it's a new title, not a new position, just to be very clear. We did this economically. So thank you, with just the needs that were out there.
Thank you.
And moving to the graduation, the board passed, and we shared the administrative regulation. The board had asked, we'd really like to take a look at this. We had an administrative regulation that just shared notification of graduation regalia. And we have 74 students that notified us that they would like to use traditional forms of regalia. And so we'll take a look at it. We're going to be at graduations. Just to let you know, we expect a little over 3,300 seniors, and they are on track to graduate next week. Big celebration, 2 a day for quite some time, and then our smaller schools will just continue in the evenings and the days. So it's a fun time next week. Graduation also, this is huge. We have these students graduating with a biliteracy seal. They actually take a third-party assessment. So this isn't given to them. They actually work hard for this. And I talked to a mom tonight that I believe a son who went to Ecuador actually passed the biliteracy, especially after that experience. This does tag that onto their diploma, such as something that they can leave high school with that can immediately put them above another employee or another student for jobs and for opportunities. That it's just one more thing in their feather in their cap to be able to leave high school with. So 400 seniors, they've earned it in 19 different languages, and 20 of those students actually had the seal of biliteracy, I guess you could say in 2 languages other than English. 2 languages, so it would technically be 3. They have English and 2 others. So that's quite exciting. Graduation, career and technical ed, so that we have over 1,800 seniors were assessed in a CTE course, which having take the course and assessed in third-party assessment. 8 students went direct entry into apprenticeship out of King Tech, and 70 seniors participated in career and technical student organization. One of those seniors did do IBEW in apprenticeship, and the others were differences. 10 students will be traveling to the CTSO competition over the summer because they are state winners. And 3 seniors from Service High Culinary Team are competing at the National Pro Star Invitational this week. We just want to say congratulations. We have awesome students here. And summer school update, this is my last update. We provide the board each year a list of where summer schools are, who are the participants, what time is it, how do we get the information. We want to let you know that all data and information is transparent. We streamlined the summer building usage as well as maximizing summer buildings, collaborated on different programs and with lunch and transportation. And you can take a look at the ASD Summer Learning webpage. The bunny trail is, if you see the box that just came up, you go to the home page of the ASD website, you go to Families, ASD Summer Learning Overview. The arrow points to exactly where the Families tab is, and on the left in blue you have AEL, CITC, Migrant Ed, ESY, title programs, other summer learning. This is where you can look at all the different programs, and they will go directly to these different pages and share the information. So similar to this first tab of academic English learners, there's 3 different areas there. They can have the Muse program, the Summer Bridge, lots of opportunities. They're right online. If anyone requests, we just want to say go to the website. It'll share that information. We're very excited about it to be a one-stop shop for our community. And thank you, board. That is the completion of my update.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. And if we could move forward. Are you ready, new VP?
I move to approve the consent agenda, ASD Memorandum number 148, Personnel Report, the February 4th, 2019 regular session minutes, the February 19th, 2019 work session, executive session, and regular session minutes, the February 27th, 2019 special meeting minutes, and the March 4th, 2019 executive session and regular session minutes.
Do I have a second? Yep. Board members, please vote. And the approval of the consent agenda items passes with 7 yeas. We are getting ready to go into our action items, and the procedures for agenda item testimony are as follows. An action item memo is first introduced by the Vice President, and if seconded by another board member, I will open the floor for public testimony. If you have signed up in advance or indicate you're interested in providing testimony, I will call you to come to the front table to speak. You again will have 3 minutes to talk, and you will see a timer on the screen to your left to monitor the time remaining and inform you of when you need to conclude. After all testimony closes, I will open the floor for board discussion, followed by the student board representative vote, before finally calling for an official vote. The voting results will be displayed on the screen. You have to read that.
I move to approve ASD Memorandum number 152 and adopt the attached resolution in support of National Teachers Day, May 7th, 2019.
Second.
Is there any public testimony? Hearing any, no testimony, is there any board discussion? Yes.
Oh, sorry, I just.
Oh. Mr. Holman?
I'll try to speak briefly in favor of this. I do think it's an awfully difficult time, and I'm going to say for most teachers, I think when they look at what's coming out of the state right now, and when they look across the country, they're pretty discouraged. Normally a resolution like this is sort of an ordinary thing, and we sort of expect it. I think if we really mean it, we're going to have to really work at it as an administration and a board over the summer and the coming year. The one thing I would like to emphasize is I hope educators across the district recognize that the administration and the board are trying very hard not to pink slip anybody this month in the face of perhaps the most uncertain fiscal situation ever. And I think somehow that's almost lost in the static, but I hope they do recognize that it is a commitment to trying to keep the core of what we do whole. And I do think a lot of the public really deeply respects what our educators do, and we do as well. Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell?
I echo much of what Member Holloman said. I was at the IB completion ceremony for our seniors at West last week, and it was their largest class ever. It was really wonderful, incredible students. One of the students talked about how every day in every class, at the end of the class, he thanks his teacher. And he said, the teachers are so passionate, they care so deeply, they work so hard, and they are so unappreciated. And to hear him say that, I just thought if every teacher had a student like that in their class, how much they would be buoyed. And I really hope that they know that we all deeply appreciate what they do. And that's where the magic happens. And they're just incredible. We have unbelievable teachers in this district, and we have students doing things they never believed they would be able to do because of those teachers. And I just really am appreciative and respectful of our teachers. It's a hard job. I don't think I could do it, and they do it out of love for their students. So I wholeheartedly support this.
I will say that it's been a little while, but my son, who's now almost 21, back in elementary school, he said, you know, my teacher is like having a second mom. She cares for me just as much as my mother does. So I thought that's a great testament. So any other comments? All right, student vote, please.
Yes.
And that resolution passes unanimously with 7 yeas.
Right, I move to approve ASD Memorandum Number 149 and authorize the superintendent to accept a grant from the National Security Agency's StarTalk Grant Program in the amount of $89,837. The project provides Chinese cultural and language enrichment experiences for students attending a variety of different schools and programs throughout Anchorage.
There's a second? Okay. Is there any public testimony on Memorandum 149? No public testimony. Is there any board questions or discussion? Okay, student vote, please.
Yes.
Members vote, please vote. And that resolution, or that Memorandum 149 passes unanimously with 7 yeas.
I move to approve ASD Memorandum Number 139 and authorize the superintendent to award a contract for the Birchwood Elementary School roof replacement project to Aklutna Construction and Maintenance LLC for a total award amount of $2,347,391. The total contract award includes the base bid amount of $2,341,367 and a total Siemens allowance of $6,024.
Second.
Is there any public testimony on Memorandum 139? Seeing no testimony, is there any board discussion? No board discussion. Student vote, please.
Yes.
Members, please vote. And Memorandum 139 passes unanimously with 7 yeas.
I move to approve ASD Memorandum Number 140 and authorize the superintendent to award a contract for the Ptarmigan Elementary School roof replacement project to Orion Construction Incorporated for a total award amount of $2,385,903. The total contract award includes the base bid amount of $2,379,000 and a total Siemens allowance of $6,903.
Second.
Is there any public testimony on Memorandum 140? Hearing no public testimony, is there any board discussion? Student vote, please.
Yes.
Board members, please vote. And Memorandum 140 passes unanimously with 7 yeas. Okay, and that, now we are moving on to non-action items. Is there any non-action item that board members would like to pull for discussion? Alicia.
I'd like to pull number 163, revision to school board policy 5131.7, and ASD memorandum 160 on resolution on naming something after Senator Davis.
Okay. Any other memorandums that board members like to pull? Okay, then we will vote. No, we just go right. Yeah. So the first one is Memorandum 160, which was moved from action to non-action. Ms. Hildy, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you. And, the resolution is fine, but we had talked before kind of briefly on different possibilities of what we might do to honor Senator Davis. And we just never had that conversation. You know, I would love to see something where students are actually going to get to learn about her and her legacy. And coming to the boardroom, very few people come here. I mean, over the course of their academic career, many people will never step foot in here, but an elementary school or even a football stadium or something like that is far more visible and helps people understand that legacy. And we certainly just don't get a lot of, I think it's worth having more discussion about what our different options are, and if this is the best option, that's fine, but I just don't think we've had that discussion.
I do want to mention that as a board, we're limited to what we can suggest. That part of that is under the superintendent. And if you'd like to speak to that, Dr. Bishop.
Sure. I was wondering, I'm going to surprise you. Mike Graham, do you have the information that we, off the top of your head, that we provided in regard to naming of schools or naming of places other than schools? There is a difference, and I think to streamline this, I think that this is why, but it's more of a global process. So I'll just turn it over to Mike Graham.
Yes, we actually have this sort of two aspects to it. It is an AR that was adopted here fairly recently. One had to do with schools and things, and others parts of schools, be it a theater or a library or a cafeteria or something. Actually, Dave Whiting worked really closely with us, moving that language from the old policy to the new. Dave, do you want to add to this at all? I can certainly pull it up.
Do you remember what the differences are in regard to the processes?
I can pull it up quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't want to say what's not correct.
Right.
Could we take a 2-minute?
Sure.
At ease, and then we'll get the policy for you.
Yeah.
What policy are we looking at?
The policy is what we can do as a board as far as
Oh, the
naming.
limitations
Yes,
on
our
naming?
limitations, yes.
A 7511A here.
Mr. McAllis was saying he thinks a facility would require the assembly to approve.
District-wide committee.
So maybe name national reservation.
Fields are specific.
Just do a link.
Maybe named by the board, so this is.
Yeah.
Citizens, board members, students.
May submit name.
I guess it still goes to the board.
Oh, it may be named by national, so local.
Okay.
So we're gonna.
Okay, Madam President, I do have a report. So the present policy is, member Michaela said this as well, is 7511, naming of a facility. So our policy is that the superintendent or designee will be responsible to appoint a committee for the naming of schools, facilities, fields, and other areas. So I believe this being the board room and not a set facility that is owned by the district, my understanding is that the suggestion was for this building because it can be done by the board and be done immediately. The other option would be then to turn it over to administration to come up with a committee. A location would be found, a discussion, probably more community engagement involved, and it would be a longer time process, but that's certainly an option at this time.
So based on that information, Ms. Bellamy.
Sorry. So I appreciate that, Dr. Bishop. Being the new person on the board, and I'm not saying that, I don't know that we have to rush to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see more community engagement, and I'd like to see us maybe take a little bit more time, and for me personally, to understand the options. And if there is a cost associated with, then we can be creative with involving the community maybe in that cost. Or we can You know, I'm not sure what those parameters are, but I'm not looking to, I would like to see a significant space. Not that this boardroom is not significant, because all of you guys are fabulous, but I would like to see a more significant memorial in Betty's honor. And if not, then at least I'd like to see the options, more options.
Sure. And thank you. Madam President, may I, was the recommendation that came to the board to name this entire building?
Yes.
Okay, so it's this building. Okay, so there was a building selected?
No. I know, at one time, what it came forward is to name this building after the Betty Davis Education Center, but as a board, we don't have the authority to do that.
And then we have basically it's in an entire facility or a room, and it's written in the AR 7511A. When a school or facility is to be named, again, it goes back to the superintendent will appoint a district-wide committee. It defines whom would be the members of that committee, but it really charges that it's a district-wide search and input. And citizens, board members, students, PTAs, anyone can submit names for consideration when you open it up. So it would be a broader process for someone might have a different name. And then this committee would vote and, move forward the reasons why. If we opened it up, it might open it up to other influences, I don't know. The superintendent will make the final recommendation to the board. In selecting names, special consideration will be given to those names that have special meaning, such as Senator Davis. And school facilities may be named for national, state, or local leaders, as well as community leaders. But fields and other specific areas on a school campus or within a school building may be named by the board. So I think to respond to the community that asked about this building, I think the board wanted to make an action to start with the boardroom and have it be the Davis boardroom, Betty Davis boardroom, but we can turn it into a facility, which is a longer process.
Yes, Ms. Hildy.
And I appreciate the recommendation that came from the Betty Davis Leadership Summit, but if we're going to be renaming, I want the full community to have the opportunity to say we're going to consider this, and it might not be the same. Maybe, I don't know if they considered schools or things, I don't know that that's their final recommendation. I wasn't there, public wasn't part of our school district process, I don't believe. So certainly, I just would, if we're going to consider something, I want a full options.
Just a point of clarification. So and I'm okay with the extra time, but I hear what you're saying, Dr. Bishop, and I hear what you're saying. It just seems to me that we do need to do a broader, I guess a more inclusive kind of process. And I don't know, I just need to make sure also that it's not a matter of whether or not we do it. I mean, we name something. I mean, I'm not looking to go through a process and people tell me no. I'm looking for a process.
Welcome to the board.
I'm looking for a process whereby we are asking input to make something happen. So I think that's what the policy allows us to do, correct?
Correct. If
okay.
You want to name a facility, you would ask the superintendent to have a process to name the facility.
Exactly.
However, can we rename a facility that's already named? This one doesn't have a name, but can you rename an existing school that already has a name?
I would stay away from that
Yeah.
if there was significance. Yeah.
I would too.
I mean, somebody might want, I think you can ask people too and say, anybody interested, because there's a lot of schools that have just, they might be interested in having that name. I don't want to preclude that.
I don't want to preclude it, I just want to make sure that there's not something that says we can't
Andy
do
has
that.
his
Yeah.
hand up.
Mr. Holloman.
I think the idea of having community involvement and coming to the decision is the right way to go with it. And I do have a reservation about naming something we don't actually own. We used to be in a different building forever that we didn't own as administrative headquarters, and now it feels like we've been in this one forever. But to be honest, we may leave this building one day, and that's I certainly would want the community to be involved in the decision, like that. If anyone ever wants to honor me, you can pick one of your older vans and, like, paint something on the back bumper, and it will go away pretty soon. But I do think for Ms. Davis that we want something that's going to last at least as long as she did, and that's a pretty big hurdle.
So am I hearing from the board then that we would like to task the superintendent with moving forward with this and developing a committee? Okay. Any other board comments or, okay? You're welcome. So, 163.
Thank you. I see this as a non-action item, and I understand the process of getting it on here. My concern is always, anytime we're going to change policies, I want stakeholders involved that are going to be affected. And we see some of those consequences, and going forward, I just want us to make sure we're considering all aspects of the implications of changing our policies, that we don't do these lightly, and that we take the time necessary to make those changes. So if this is on here as a non-action, then I would expect to see it next week as an action item for me to be voting on. I haven't heard from any of those stakeholders. I haven't heard if this is necessary or if there's other alternatives that are better, or I just haven't heard any consideration of analysis.
I'm going to just say my thoughts on this, and I think that it's not a mandatory, but the process we have in place is there is, my understanding in talking to administration is there is a process in place where each incident is vetted and talked about within the committee and what the recommendation is. So they bring that recommendation to the board based on the information that they have and what they've investigated. It's up to the board. We can say 2-year, we can say 3-year, whatever. I mean, that's something we have the ability to do that. But I like the idea that it still goes through a process with individuals that have the ability to make that recommendation to us, and then as a board. Right. Sorry. But having that process in place to be able to vet each one of those occurrences and then be able to bring the recommendation to the board. The board doesn't have to follow that recommendation. We can always vote on something else. So I think that's there without having to make it mandatory. Making it mandatory leaves us with little other options if there's extenuating circumstances. Mr. Donnelly, this is your policy. Would you like to speak to it?
Well, as I've expressed before, I think the current policy doesn't draw a clear dichotomy between some of the situations that we're faced with nationally with loaded firearms in our schools. And I think there's a distinction, a valid distinction, between destructive weaponry, such as bombs and other weapons of mass destruction, and loaded firearms from the definitions that are currently in here for this, that would apply to have the presumptive 1-year minimum. So I think a higher minimum suspension is very appropriate for anyone, a student that brought one of those weapons of mass destruction to our schools vis-a-vis someone who had a BB gun, which right now, BB gun is the same presumptive expulsion or suspension as a loaded firearm or a bomb, or for that matter, a hand grenade. It's the same thing. And I just think there's a clear distinction between those two things and the classes of weapons involved.
Ms. Hildy.
And I wasn't talking about the merit of the decision. I'm talking about the process of collecting input from the people who, it might be a very nice idea, but I haven't heard from a legal opinion or a person for the people doing the enforcement of it, or and we've seen that in our other policies where we come back and say, oh, I wish we had heard from that person. That would have made this policy a lot more effective. I would like that to be our standard practice, that we are making sure that we are looking at all aspects of our policies and how the implications of it from more than just our limited views. So I guess I would move for it to, I thought this was coming up in governance, but I guess I would move for it to go to governance since it's a policy review. And if governance would spend some actual time bringing stakeholders to the table and doing a thorough vetting of it, then it would be something I would be more comfortable with that process.
So are you,
I move this to governance.
do I have a second?
Second.
Wait a minute. Miss Margot.
And I'm not really as versed probably as you guys are because I'm catching up. But there seems to me to be a difference between how the district responds to any threat, and you don't always get to know whether it's a BB gun or a fake gun or a whatever kind of gun. But where you do that, I'm sorry?
Well, she had raised her hand before you seconded it. Let's.
Am I out of order?
Let's go ahead and vote on it, and then you can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we still have conversations because we had more individuals that
Sure,
wanted
there's
to
just a
speak.
motion on the floor that
Yeah, I
needs to
know.
be resolved.
It hadn't been seconded before she spoke. Yeah, I know.
So I'm just now making it so we can vote, so just give me a second.
But we have to vote to do the committee, right? What? She was starting to speak about the same time you were starting to
Oh.
second it.
My apologies.
No, it's not your fault.
Debate on the motion?
Yes. So if I could let Ms. Bellamy finish her comment, and then you, Mr. Donnelly.
Okay. So I guess I would support moving it back to governance simply because I think I hear what Mr. Donnelly's saying, but I also know that when these risks present themselves, we don't always get to know up front whether it's a BB gun or a real gun. We just know something's going on. So the response to it has to be immediate and I guess aggressive. But in the sanctions or the consequences, that's where you're going to make a difference in whether something ends up really being a real gun or a BB gun. All right, both can cause harm, different levels of harm, and so I think I would like to have more discussion. Send it back to. So I would be supporting the motion to send it back to governance.
Mr. Donnelly.
Yeah, in the 2 years I've been here, we've had multiple cases of suspensions, or I guess these are expulsions. What's the correct terminology? Expulsion, right?
Probably expulsions.
And because of the way the rule is written, there's never a recommendation for longer than a 1 year presumptive. And I think that's just wrong. I think it doesn't make any logical sense that we're suspending students for bringing an air gun to school for the same presumptive period, although we don't have to let them back in the same amount of time, but for the same presumptive period as somebody who brings a hand grenade to a classroom. I think that's just ludicrous. I've made a motion here that we have a longer period of time, a presumptive period of time from 1 to 2 years, where the matter at hand was a loaded semi-automatic revolver with a loaded additional magazine. And that wasn't approved. And I thought that was a serious mistake by this board. So we need to address this issue. I do not think the current policy makes any sense. It's like having a criminal law where there's no distinction between the seriousness of the damage done. This current policy doesn't take into the seriousness appropriately. And I think bringing one of these destructive class weapons, which is already defined in the regulations, is a much more serious offense than some of the other offenses that get the same exact presumptive time period of expulsion. And it's a pretty straightforward question. There's no question of constitutionality here or technical. I think it's just really straightforward. Should we treat BB guns and non-firearms that are currently classified as deadly weapons, the same as deadly weapons or instruments of mass destruction in our board policy, and I don't think we should. And I don't see any technical issues with that. It's already defined in the rules what a dangerous weapon is, or a destructive weapon class. So let's just, address it. Do you want that to be a longer period or not? I think it's really straightforward.
Dr. Bishop.
Thank you. I think what's on the table is the merit of discussing it longer, which is what's there. But also, if you think about it this way, that expulsion means forever. Expulsion means never, you don't come back. Expulsion is you don't get to come back. The presumptive is the part that is the first time that the board will hear whether they have a student come back. So the presumptive sanction is that you cannot even come back to the board to request any kind of leniency, or as you talk about the differences, of seriousness. There's differences of age. There's differences of circumstances, similar to the law that provides it. The way school discipline is written in presumptive sanctions, whether they be, a 3-day presumptive sanction for smoking on school grounds or whatever, they're basically saying it cannot, a suspension, is an expulsion, but it cannot be any less than this. But technically, just so you understand, expulsion is forever, and the presumptive part of that is just that we presume that they will not even come back to us within a year. But as the president said, not coming back or at all is also on the table. So just so how it really isn't law. We don't have criminal law in schools. If it is criminal, it is addressed by the criminal justice system, which these are. This is just the school law or the school process piece of it.
I'm going to go with Ms. Bakalis first.
So also to agree with Dr. Bishop that we do have a motion on the floor, and it is to talk about moving it back to governance. I can tell by listening to everybody that this is a topic that, we all want to, dig into, understand, and make sure we are making the right decision going forward. And so I am going to vote. And you followed the right process. You got more than 2 to say, let's put on the agenda, and we're having the conversation. We have to go back to governance. I'm going to support that because I do want to make sure we understand all sides of it, and I would encourage others to get ready to vote on that.
Mr. Holloman.
Mainly for clarifications for anybody that may be listening and be confused, we don't treat it the same. And this is worded differently from, say, like a presumptive sentence, which it's not. If there was a parallel in criminal court, it'd be, well, we're going to put you in jail for at least a year, and we may never let you out. That's actually what our policy is here, and we are counting on the wisdom of later boards, maybe a year later, maybe 5 years later, to look at how someone who might have been a first grader has changed during that time. So it's worded differently, and it has a different impact. We don't treat them the same. We'd never treat them the same. I can't imagine a board that would look at someone who brought in a grenade with aggression and treat that the same as a BB gun. I would be boggled if that happened. I would support moving this to the committee.
Okay, no further discussion. I think we should go ahead and vote on moving this to committee or not moving it to committee. So the amendment is...
The motion is to move this to governance.
Right.
And does the board want to put a timeline? In the past, it's been a concern. Do you want governance to consider it I can make the motion with a timeline for reporting back, or just let governance review it?
I think it needs, my opinion, it needs to be moved forward to governance, and it needs to be addressed in a timely manner, which would be within the next 1 or 2 governance meetings. Do you want that in the motion, or?
Sure, I move to move the consideration of ASD Memorandum 163 to governance for consideration within the next 2 months.
Meetings, whatever.
Yeah. I don't know why they would put them in the same category as a dangerous, as a destructive weapon, but that's the way it's written now.
Oh, I just wanted a point of clarification.
Yes. Are you on, Mr. Dunn?
It went off. Yeah. The specific proposal that we're voting on moving back to committee suggests an age of 13 and above for bringing one of these weapons to school before they would have a 2-year presumptive expulsion. It doesn't apply to first graders.
Right.
Did the voting not come up?
I have to sign back in.
Oh, wait, no, there's something come through.
I've got a window that's blocking me from voting.
Would you like to give me a voice vote and Mr. Downing, did you want to give me your voice vote or if I'm up or down? Okay. And Elisa? And Elisa? And the only other one that has not come through is Mr. Holloman. Did your voting square come up?
There you go, yes. And that amendment, or to move ASD Memorandum 163 to Governance Committee for consideration with the next 2 months, passes with 6 yeas and 1 nay. Okay, at this time, this is where new business is introduced, and I do have something that I have to introduce, and I received a email that I want to address part of this. Dr. Bishop and I both received this, and it's seeking legal opinion or potential conflict of interest when a board member receives a campaign donation from an entity clearly benefiting from the policy, and that so just based on that, I did have Dr. Bishop reach out to legal on this, and I also have a copy of our legal review done on a prior conflict of interest. And I don't, did you have that other one that with the highlighted on the okay. And then also what I've done is I've asked to bring our code of conduct, our you've got it right here, our code of ethics conduct, which we're also going to review here, and I'm going to ask Dr. Bishop to do that, and I will pass out. You should have this and this is from right.
Yeah. Did you make copies of it? I did, but I gave one to Starla.
Oh, all right.
Does everybody have one of those?
I don't know.
I did not make one.
We don't have one
Do you
for
want me to
everybody.
say that one?
Yeah.
Madam President, in regard to conflicts of interest, this did come up for a member who that could serve at a different level of government and voting in items. We did have information about that, as well as what was previously requested, that if an entity benefits from certain policy and a donation was made to a member from that entity, is that a conflict of interest? And essentially, in the board code of ethics, it is under number 2, And it talks about board members will act in the best interests of the Anchorage community, representing them honestly and equally, and avoiding conflicts of interest with other board members, friends, family, staff, students, businesses, which this would be vendors, this would be other organizations, this would entail that, as well as special interests. Board members basically should just understand that the conflict of interest or perception of a conflict of interest undermines public trust, and that board members would disclose any conflict of interest in accordance with APOC, which is the Alaska Public Offices Commission, and the MOA Code of Ethics, which is the Municipality of Anchorage. Essentially, in summary, board members will hold themselves or other board members accountable for complying to this code of conduct. I believe that the request, prior request made by a board member to another board member, as well as this present request, is following that procedure, asking, is there a conflict of interest? Again, though, the conflict of interest resides with the board member, him or herself declaring the conflict. If there isn't a resolution, or if a board member does not believe, again, in the Code of Ethics on page 6 of 7, there's a section called Board Member Concerns about Board Member Conduct. So if the conflict of interest isn't accepted or understood, or a board member still feels that there is a concern, under board member concerns about board member conduct, there's a provision that states if the concerned board member meets with the other board member remains unsatisfied, the violation is satisfied, it's been addressed, the concerns are unsatisfied, rather the concerns can then be submitted in writing. The allegation to the board president should take place if the board president is part of that conflict. The vice chair, which is now member Hildy, would address it if it's the conflict. Again, it precedes that, so it's really the board itself with the accountability here, not legal, not the administration. If after the conference, basically at this point in time, if there continues to be a conflict, the president or vice chair who's addressing it can have it investigated, get more information, ask for legal counsel, and then to share the outcome of that. So that's where we are presently. So, and I hope everyone could see it up there.
So given that this came, I wanted to make this, the board aware of this, and just state what our Code of Ethics is and what our procedures are if somebody wanted to move forward. Ms. Hildy.
And I just want to draw the board's attention to the corollary board bylaw 9270, talking about the appearance of impropriety. So something may be perfectly fine for you to not have a conflict of interest, but if there is any appearance of it, it's instructing us to over-disclose. In my profession, we always over-disclose if there's a hint of impropriety, because we want the most transparency for the integrity of this board. So that appearance of impropriety, if there's anything, you shall fully disclose the circumstances, and the board, without that member's participation, will then approve or disapprove of the member's deliberations and voting on that. Just to keep in mind.
So any other board comments or discussion? Just wanted to make all board members aware of this and what the procedure is.
Does there remain a conflict, or is this?
Well, since it's not directed at any one person, and it's just saying, what does it say? That can't receiving a campaign donation from an entity clearly benefiting from a policy. And so it would be whether that board member felt that they were influenced by receiving a campaign donation on how they voted on that policy. And it's up to that board member to disclose that conflict. If they have no conflict and they feel that they voted in good faith, just as with other things that have come up before this board, I think it's up to the board member to disclose that conflict of interest. And if they feel there's no conflict of interest, then there is a procedure to follow. Any questions? Pardon? Yeah. I actually, go ahead, Ms. Hildy.
Thanks. I wanted to bring these up during the work session, but we just ran out of time. So some things that I'm just, we'll call it stressing over. When are we going to start working on post-destination 2020 goals, and what kind of timeline do we want? You know, is it going to be next May and we're going to say, hey, we came up with something, or are we going to have a process throughout this year? Are we going to have community input, stakeholders saying what, or a review of Destination 2020 and saying, here's some areas we learned that might really benefit our students if we focused more on these 3 areas in the coming years. I'm just concerned about our lack of timeline, and I think it'd be great to start working on that.
And Ms. Mitchell and I have been discussing this in some of our meetings as president and vice president, and we do feel like there should be an ad hoc committee to put together a strategic plan on how the board would like to move forward with this and what kind of input we'd like to get from the community, from the public, from teachers, from students, and how we move forward.
Do you want to make that committee now, or you want a resolution? I'll make a resolution next week if you want.
We had talked about putting it on the agenda for the retreat, but maybe that would, I mean, maybe we should do it now. I don't know what the better approach is.
I would love for the work to start, and then at the retreat, we can get some direction from the board, since we'll all be meeting together, and present something to the board and say, here's maybe what the process might look like, and then at the board meeting, we could have clarity.
Well, as president, I can appoint an ad hoc committee on strategic planning for transition from the 90 by 2000. And at this time, I know that Ms. Mitchell has expressed interest in chairing that. And if she'd like someone else to help her with that, would be fine. And then board members can opt to become part of that committee.
I welcome, I mean, I'm happy to chair that, and I welcome anybody who would like to be part of that. And Alicia, I would love your input on this. So if you are willing to serve on that, that would be fantastic.
I would love to get to work on that with you.
Awesome. Anybody else? Well, yes.
So the committee would come up with the plan that we're going to implement to come up with our goals.
Right.
Okay.
We'll do some preliminary research. We'll present it at the, that's my understanding, we'll present it at the retreat. And I think the committee will stay in place to spearhead that. But, you know, it would take the whole board agreeing to our approach.
Okay.
Right. It'll be the committee comes together with a recommendation for the board on how we move forward, and then the board discusses that.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, I'll be there, although I'm not an official member.
Ex officio.
Yeah. Anything else, Ms. Hildy?
I'll stop there.
Okay. I did have. Well, I had something else, but I can't remember what it was, so we'll wait. Oh, Ms. Snelling.
I just wanted to throw out there, I know you've been asking a couple of times, but I would like to, just from kind of listening to some of the conversation, that we do make the code of conduct part of our board retreat.
Okay.
And whenever that date gets decided, so that we all have a chance to review it and put fresh eyes onto it, and maybe that's a good time to re-sign it and re-agree to it, or whatever, you know, form it might take, just so that we don't feel like people are being caught off guard with surprises because it's been a year since we've talked about it. But to go ahead and bring that up would be a wonderful thing.
And having said that, if I can, I was hoping that board members would submit their agenda items for the retreat, what they would like to have in discussion. We will be meeting on the 14th to set that agenda, and that will be the new vice president and president who will set that agenda. So I do need that information from other board members, and I was hoping by, well, as soon as possible. Yes. Or Katie.
So just a point of clarification, I thought we had agreed that we're going to stay with the retreat dates for the 14th and 15th of June. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Donnelly?
Yeah, I remain very concerned about the lack of progress on the school safety ad hoc committees. It's been about 6 months, 8 months ago, I brought this up, and I was advised there would be meetings coming up with the ad hoc committee because there was a lot more to be done than what was done 2 years ago. And I haven't heard anything that anything's even scheduled to return consideration to what needs to be done to better protect our schools.
Okay, yeah, that was an administrative committee, correct?
It was established after, yes, part of the information that came out of it was what's being worked on now. We haven't, I don't believe, I'll have to check with Tom, have a meeting, but part of the bond items as well as the items that are going into Chuquette High and other schools in regard to physical safety and reorganization of areas was part of that. And I know that that's being worked on, but I'll have Tom Roth, who's chairing that work.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop, through the president. So if I might, what the district is doing on a monthly basis, we do host a monthly security integration meeting, and a lot of the initiatives and recommendations that came out of that safety ad hoc committee that board member Donnelly is referencing, after the Parkland incident, are items that we're continuing to work. Examples are security systems, surveillance systems, keyless entry, amongst others. So it is a continuing process within the district, probably more programmatic.
Madam President, perhaps we do an update officially face-to-face so that questions can be asked. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other new business? Okay, at this time, I would ask if there's any public testimony. On any non-action or non-agenda. It would be something new.
Am I on? My name is Eugene Carl Habron. I represent myself. I live in the Matsu Valley. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, a decision made by the governing body is more likely to public interest. I'm not going to be addressing what I discussed earlier. Just 3 points. Frequently during the meeting, I was having trouble following with what members were saying. There were some problems with the mics. You saw me a little bit more closer than normally, and that's because these sidebars with mics not working are creating a situation the public can't hear, number one. No, and what I'm saying is just respectfully so that everyone can hear each other. Then the other thing is you did a motion to go for a 5-minute break, okay? But I noted, and I do a timer, and it was approximately 1 minute and 21 seconds later you call the meeting back to order. There's nothing wrong with when you do a 5-minute break and you don't come back and start 6 or 7 or 8 minutes later. But there is something very wrong when you start the meeting less than the time you state you're going to have a 5-minute break. The last thing to say is with respect, everyone needs to hear each other respectfully. And as you know, certain times the audience is, during breaks, it's hard to control and get people back. I would strongly recommend you just to take a little bit more time, use the gavel and make sure everything's more calmed down, because obviously there's difficulty for people getting back into order. Otherwise, no one's going to hear anything, and we need to hear each other. And that's all I have to say with respect. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other testimony on any non-action or action items? Okay, hearing none, this is the time where school board administration can make comments. Do we have any comments? Mr. Donnelly?
So do we still have the School Safety Ad Hoc Committee? I mean, does it exist still, and when will it meet again?
Through the president to member Donnelly, because it is an ad hoc, it's called when needed and not. And so I believe we can get, I don't think we've disbanded it, but it has not met. They're working on the initial recommendations. And so I will report in the Board Connect Friday about the plan for next meetings.
I just want to express, this is our chance to express, there were so many more things that should have been considered at that time before this process ended, and it just has stopped. It's been going nowhere for over a year now. The committee hasn't had another meeting, and I thought that the report was very, very, very incomplete as far as its analysis of all the potential things that can be done to make our schools safer. And so I'm very disappointed the process hasn't continued. I think it's great they have their monthly meetings thinking about what they already have on the list, but I think the list is very incomplete and needs a considerable amount more work, because I do not think we've done everything we should be doing to make our schools safer.
And Mr. Johnley, maybe, just a suggestion, but maybe you could meet with Mr. Roth and share what you think those further items might be that need to be addressed.
I'll bring it to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Because I've done that. I've done a lot of research on this
Okay.
subject, and I've been waiting for an opportunity to bring it to the committee, because that was the process. Committees. I was going to bring it to the committee, right? But every time I was told, well, the committee's going to be meeting, it's been over a year now, and the committee has never met again.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'll just bring it directly to the rest of my fellow board members.
Okay.
now.
We welcome that. Ms. Mitchell?
I'm just curious, since this preceded my tenure on the board, who is the chairperson of that committee?
Through the president to Member Mitchell, Tom Roth and our chief academic officer, Mike Graham, chaired the committee in regard to immediate concerns following to look at our written policy as well as our capital infrastructure. So our behaviors through policy as well as, and it was a small group. They worked over time with parents to come with some recommendations for administrative recommendation, what we could put in policy. We followed through on that side. The other side of the house was the capital, and it was continuing. There has been an intent. It hasn't been a year for which we have said we don't want to think about safety. There's quite a few things that were very safety driven this year, starting with student behaviors at schools, earthquakes, things like that. So I want to take the responsibility personally. Had I known that there was a list of particulars that wanted to be delivered, we would have immediately had an opportunity for a board member to share concerns. I was not aware of that. But I would say that ASD is thinking, especially this year of any other year, is continually thinking about safety. So we will respond after the board has had its opportunity to look at those recommendations.
Thank you.
Okay, on a good note, I'm going to say I went to the ACT graduation today, and I tell you, you need to bring a box of Kleenexes with you, because those individuals have amazing stories of what they've overcome and how they were funny, they were articulate. Some of them were so interesting. One of them talked about she went in the men's bathroom by mistake on the first day on the job, and just mistakes that we all make. But there was humor, there was tears, and there was just this sense of, I have accomplished something and I'm ready to move on. The transition was good. So kudos to Cindy and the group that works with them, and the teachers, and the students couldn't say enough good things about their teachers and how everything they do for them. And it's not just that program, but all of our programs, and what our teachers do for our students every day. And even administration. I mean, this district is about our kids, and everything we do, including the board, is about how we do that better. So thank you. And if there's no other comments,